our time to begin our next session titled Economic Strategies and Political Settlements, Current Economic Challenges and Way Forward. For this session, we have a distinguished set of panelists. Panelist Dr. Mushtaq H. Khan, Professor of Economics, SOAS, University of London. Dr. Selim Raihan, Professor, Department of Economics, University of Dhaka. Professor Dr. Mahbub Ullah, Economics and former Chairman, Department of Economics, University of Dhaka. Nuria Lopez, Chairperson, European Union Chamber of Commerce in Bangladesh. Dr. Imran Matin, Executive Director, BRAC Institute of Governance and Development, BIGD. Mr. Zakir Hossain Khan, who is going to moderate this session, Chief Executive, Change Initiative. Now let's welcome our panelists for the next session, and I request Mr. Zakir Hossain Khan to take over the session. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's a good afternoon. I believe that we are really running short of time. It's a dilemma. How can we manage all the good words from the esteemed speakers? And we're really very happy. It's very much dynamic and diverse, the speakers we have. And at the same time, very important discussions about the economic strategies and the connection with the political settlement. The July Revolution is very much related with the deltaic natures of this region, basically. If you see, the people and the whole geographically is been connected to each other, to the natural resources. Like whenever we see the Bengal Delta, this delta is the 7% land of the Ganga, Brahmaputra and Meghna basin. But it has been carrying the 93% of the water of the GBM basins. And Bangladesh has been carrying all the water towards the Bay of Bengal. So that means we don't have a choice to be diverse, or to be divergence rather than to be inclusive. We have to be much more, the resource-centric wild management we should have. And that is the natural, the outfit, natural choice. We cannot ignore the natural resource management. Whatever the settlement, doesn't matter, economic settlement or the political settlement, it should have been based on the resources we have already endowed with the natures. Whenever it comes to the Sundarban, it has been divided into two parts, the Indian parts and the Bangladeshi parts. There is two different state law or customary law, but the Sundarban itself is a unique ecosystem law. Whatever the poisoning side in the other part of the Sundarban, definitely it affects the downstream part of the Sundarban. That means we cannot ignore the natural law, we cannot ignore the natural resource-led ecosystem-based governance as well. And whatever the political settlement, that one of the two major perspectives is how to manage the power balance, at the same time how to manage the resource efficiently and equitably. So I would not go for detail about that. I believe that the esteemed speakers are there. Welcome to these sessions. Since we have a very limited time, we couldn't able to actually judge the whole the discussions from each one, but we'll allow maximum 7 to 8 minutes. So I would like to request have a keynote speech from the Professor Mushtaq Khan. He's the pioneer in the political settlement theory, and also he is the person who is always evolving in the nature in terms of the innovation and the governance. So I would request Professor Mushtaq Khan, whatever you feel, you can just speak from here or the desk. Thank you very much. Mushtaq Khan, floor is yours.
Thank you, Zakir. Because time is short, I'm going to just throw out some ideas. Bangladesh is at a stage where we have to change the direction of our economic strategy. And the direction of an economic strategy has to be implementable, and this is where the distribution of power comes in. Who has power in Bangladesh, and how do they exercise it? The concept of a political settlement is that your laws and institutions have to be aligned with the distribution of power. If the distribution of power, the people who are powerful do not want the implementation of your economic strategy, we can come up with the best economic strategy, it will not be implemented. Now, if I go back a little bit and say, why was Bangladesh successful for a pretty long period of time in generating jobs and generating manufacturing growth? Bangladesh came out of two partitions, one in 1947, when Bengal was split, and East Bengal was the less developed part of Bengal. In 1971, Pakistan was split, and East Pakistan was the less developed part of Pakistan. At that time, most economists and most politicians thought Bangladesh had no future. There was no future because it had no technology, it had no capitalists, it had very low levels of education. But over the next 30 or 40 years, Bangladesh actually grew rapidly. What happened? What happened was actually something that I've written about, and people did not expect it to happen, which is that the established elites were destroyed. In 1947, the landlord class, which happened to be largely Hindu, left. And in 1971, the old oligarchic capitalist class, allied with the military and the bureaucracy, who happened to be largely non-Bengali, left. So in 1971, here was a country where the old established elites had been shaken up, and then followed 10 years of chaos. There was a lot of fighting about who would become the new powerful groups. There were assassinations, there were coups, but out of that emerged a very broad-based capitalist class. It wasn't the narrow capitalist class that we find in India or Pakistan. It was a much more broad-based class which had come up from below. In a very simple sense, that distribution of power explains why in the 1980s, 1990s, and 2000s, Bangladesh had a broad-based capitalist growth with thousands and thousands of garments industries coming up, small industries coming up, medium-sized industries coming up. At that time, Bangladesh was creating more jobs per percentage of growth than India. The share of manufacturing in Bangladesh was higher than in India. Women's participation in the labor force was higher than India. Why? Because the political system was responding to the middle of society and not to the top of society. If the middle of society is powerful, then these SMEs, these small enterprises, they come in and they create jobs. The tragedy of the Awami League period from the last 17 years, from 2009 onwards, was that that political settlement, that distribution of power, which through the previous two partitions had moved to the middle from the top, again moved back to the top. In very simple sense, the political settlement under Awami League shifted back to a oligarch-driven, small number of capitalists and bureaucrats and oligarchs set the economic agenda. That also produced growth, but it was not employment-generating growth. It was not broad-based growth. It was growth for the oligarchs, theft by the oligarchs, building infrastructure and roads at 2 or 3 times the price, building power plants which were 50% more expensive than our competitors, hiding all this behind unsustainable subsidies, hiding this behind the looting of banks, and then the whole system collapsed. And the system would have collapsed even if the student uprising hadn't happened. It would have collapsed in a more bloody and more economically costly way, because the economy would have imploded. It was going in that direction. So now the question is, where do we go from here? And the answer is that we must break the power of the oligarchs. And to break the power of the oligarchs requires very targeted actions. It requires the prosecution of several of them who have engaged in mega crimes and mega theft. We need to re-establish the ability of society to recover stolen assets. Progress on that has been very slow. We also need a very powerful competition policy. We are in the stage where the United States was in the early 20th century, when the robber barons had become extremely powerful, and the Sherman Act came along, and the Sherman Act was a product of progressive politics, and with the Sherman Act, the antitrust policy started breaking up the monopolies and started creating competition again. This is a permanent challenge of capitalism. Capitalism creates concentration of power. The concentration of power destroys politics. It results in oligarch-driven growth. And if you want to have a capitalist market economy, you must have the political will and the political ability to break down these monopolies and break down these oligopolies and restart competition from the middle again. The West is failing again to do that, and they have their own crisis. India has failed to do that. India is driven by oligarchs and a proto-fascist party. We had already also reached that system, but we have a chance of resetting it. We have a chance of actually doing some targeted prosecutions of these big thieves with a strong competition policy and restart a strategy of middle-driven growth. This was the secret of China's success. China's success was based on very large numbers of medium-sized enterprises in clusters of industries, and that is why manufacturing is strong in China. We need to have this middle enterprise-driven clusters of industries in Bangladesh, and that cannot be done without addressing the political settlement problem, without addressing the issue of the distribution of power. And that is why politics, economics, and foreign policy comes together, because that oligarchic regime in Bangladesh actually was kept in power through a lot of foreign assistance, including from our Indian friends. So this combination of geopolitics, domestic politics, and economic change has to come together. These are very complex issues. I have just thrown open the discussion. I have only 10 minutes to do that, but we will continue this conversation in Bangladesh over the months and years ahead. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We are very much in time. Thank you very much. I would like to request Dr. Selim Raihan, Professor of Department of Economists and Executive of the SANEM. Thank you. as early as possible.
Thank you. I must thank the organizers for inviting me to this excellent event. And of course, after listening to Professor Mushtaq Khan, very little to add. But I just want to give you a bit another perspective, and agreeing to what Professor Mushtaq Khan has said, that the genesis of the problems, the economic problems in Bangladesh, I would say it's not only just confined to the last 15 years. It has been there for the last 5.5 decades at various degrees. Institutional challenges, weak institutional problems, not being able to develop formal institutions and relying very much on informal institutions, weak state capacity regulatory environment. I think Professor Mushtaq Khan, he has written quite a lot on this. But he's very right in saying that all these problems became very, very acute in the last 15 years or last 17 years. The way he described, I'm very much in agreement with that. Just to give you another perspective of that is that the kind of research also offers some other alternative explanation, in the sense that the way these countries, the developing countries, most of the developing countries operate, they are not really a rules-based system. They are very much kind of deals. If you look at the micro level, because Professor Mushtaq Khan talked about more at the kind of macro perspective, giving the macro perspective. At the micro level, you see the kind of deals, like, whether the deals can be open or closed or disordered or ordered. And what we have seen in Bangladesh over the last 15 years, increasing presence of the deals-based kind of system. That's why we have seen the ready-made garments also, the kind of many privileges they wanted to kind of make it more of state capture, because they found that it's not only enough to bargain with the bureaucrats or politicians to secure their privileges, but to become the member of parliaments by themselves. Probably that is the kind of ultimate goal they had once this deals-based system became more acute, and we saw this excessive use of this deals-based system becoming, having a very serious state capture. Another perspective is that in the last 15 years, what we have seen, 3 consecutive very flawed elections. So the Awami League actually lost the political legitimacy from the very beginning, and I think since 2013 or 2014. So when they lost the political legitimacy, and that is common in many developing countries, they wanted to emphasize more on development legitimacy, trying to build big infrastructure projects, and of course they secured various kinds of rents from there. And these development projects, initially probably they created some kind of pseudo or kind of image of the country that the country is progressing. But because of their inherent inbuilt problem, they failed. So many of these infrastructure development projects were based on disordered, closed deals, and many of them were could not be delivered on time, and still we are struggling with many big mega projects. So what we saw that over the last 15 years, and it was a kind of culmination of the very serious deficit in the political legitimacy, erosion of development legitimacy, and then we saw the July upsurge last year. So I fully agree with Professor Mushtaq Khan that the challenges the country is in, a lot of areas need to be looked at, a lot of reforms in taxation, banking sector, trade policy. We have very concentrated export basket, public expenditure, and especially when it comes to spending, making quality spending and spending on social sector, the country has done so poorly on in terms of spending on health and education in last 2.5 decades, irrespective of who was in the government. But more importantly, in the last 10-15 years, we have seen there has been no increase in allocation in proportion to GDP on health and education. At the same time, quality of spending deteriorated quite significantly. So my conclusion is that when you are talking about reforms, and also how do you really make this economic system more vibrant, and Professor Mushtaq Khan hinted or suggested few, but I see there are 2 sets of challenges. One is, of course, from the supply side, there's challenges that who will undertake the reform. And Professor Mushtaq Khan talked about a new political settlement, but the political settlement, the actors of the political settlement are the political elites, business elites, bureaucrats, and of course a part of the civil society where I belong to. So do you have any kind of consensus there? I know Professor Mushtaq Khan probably would like to make a differentiation between the consensus and the settlement, but in order to get into a settlement which is favorable for country's development, we need some consensus there too. So that is one thing on the supply side. But on the demand side, I think many of these reform initiatives or the demands for reform are actually we have seen that they come from mostly from the civil society, NGOs or development partners, not really being understood very strongly by the major political actors. So if we don't see that kind of demand, and if we can't really put pressure on the political parties to change their behavior, I fear that probably we'll stuck to the vicious cycle of what we have witnessed in the past decade. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Selim Raihan. He took less than the allocated time, but he has a very good point that if we don't have a consensus on the political settlement, there is always risk of having the vicious cycle to be appear again. And we know that the Bangladesh, the economic prosperity of Bangladesh, one of the core stakeholders are the entrepreneurs. Doesn't matter the Bangladeshi national entrepreneurs or the foreign investors. So they are the partner of our journey, and obviously one of the core economic opportunity has been coming through the government sectors. And I believe the foreign investors are really very much instrumental. And in terms of the political stability, in terms of the economic stability, this is really very important for the foreign direct investment. Taking that as a note, I would like to request the Nuria Lopez, European Union Chamber of Commerce and Bangladesh Chairpersons, to have your speech. Thank you very much, Nuria. Floor is yours.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak today, and I'm going directly because I know that we have a lot of constraints with the time. So, as my colleague says before, the contents right now is that we are after 15 years of concentrated power, we are in a state at the moment of a big weakness in the economy. We are considering that this has created a lot of concentration in just the hands of few oligarchs, let's put it this way, and that is affecting the economy of Bangladesh a lot. So we are right now facing a moment where we have to face LDC graduation. We are now understanding that the full economic situation in the world has changed. We cannot even understand what is happening and how is the model going to be in the future. So all this comes to us saying that we are in a very urgent moment to really implement reforms in the country, and we need to understand that we have to act immediately. Yes, we have to apply those reforms, but at the same time, I also believe strongly that we have to request an extension on the graduation as LDC country. Not as a delay, because a delay is not what is important. It's because we have to be prepared, and we have to really create a strong roadmap and a strong commitment just to reach the graduation time, being prepared and addressing it properly. We have to commit on that from all the stands, from the private sector, from the government, from the private society. We have to go there and be strong when we graduate. From the private sector perspective, I'm here honored to be with the academics, with very respected people, that they speak much better than me. But I will just give you the problems that we are facing as the private sector. We face unreliable power, gas and electric shortage, high interest rates, very difficult to make investment in Bangladesh with financing, inflated logistics costs that is creating a problem in our competitiveness. We just recently listened that 10%, we have at least 10% higher in logistic costs than our neighboring countries, which are our competitors nowadays. Those are not theories, those are directly block competitiveness that really discourage investment in Bangladesh. Then my Eurochamp, I am the chairperson of the Eurochamp. My role in Bangladesh is to bring foreign investment as one of the things, and to support Bangladesh in modernizing. The revolution also inflecting me and myself the message that I also have to fight for those goals of changes that the young generations were asking for. So that's, for me, it's very challenging. If we cannot show a serious commitment to modernization and reforms, we cannot ask foreign investors to come to here. The investors are looking for a dynamic and forward-looking country with a clear vision. And that is the big question I have and I will put today. What vision are we pursuing? An open, modern, competitive economy, or a protective model that's centered in efficiency? That is what we have to reconsider. And if we are going for an open, modern, competitive economy, we need to call right now for action. We cannot wait. We want a sustainable graduation, an investment, and we need to bold the reforms and clear commitments and real modernization from everybody. As I said before, the time to act is now. It's really, we need to act for this extension very quickly in order to understand that we have a plan and we have a time and we have consistency and we have credibility. So it is pretty clear that extension is needed. We cannot graduate as an economy of protection and inefficiency. And we must graduate as an economy of openness, competitiveness and opportunities. And as a post-revolution time, the sacrifice of those young lives we need and we must stay together and build a new modern and inclusive country that can offer the young people a hope of a future. And this cannot achieve either by politicians alone, either by the private sector alone, or either by the social community. We have to stick together. We have to reach and use the power that the revolution implemented in all of us to achieve those changes we have to achieve. And I will be fighting very strongly to attract investment in Bangladesh because it's one of the things that we need to do if we want to change the country. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nuria. And Nuria, it's a very important point she has already raised that there was a process of the LDC graduation was started during the fascist regime, and the problem was that the whole process has been started based on a different factual, challenges and other data and other problems as well. At the same time, where currently the globally has been economically turmoil due to the Trumpism, and several duties and Trump's and other problems has been economic enabling environment has been really in the turmoil. And most important perspective is that Bangladesh has been in the crossroads right now. So she has particularly mentioned about what is the importance of delaying the whole process of the LDC graduations, considering that to grab the economic opportunities we have right now, with compared to the other, the countries like the Vietnams and others. So I believe that the point should be taken by the policymakers very much in the decision-making process. So now. We have a classical economist legend. I can say Professor Mahbub, we're really very grateful. He has been so kind to be here, and I had an opportunity to work with him whenever he was a Revenue Reform Commission member. And I believe that Sir would provide a very well, the overview on what's the real reform agenda should be in the coming days, considering the political settlement. Thank you, sir.
Thank you for including me as one of the panelists of this session. I am acquainted with Professor Mushtaq Khan's ideas since his Cambridge days. I met him for the first time when he was writing his proposal for his PhD in London and at his house in Old Brompton Road. Am I correct? And later on, we met several times, and Mushtaq Khan has been very prolific about his ideas. For the last 4 or 5 years, he has been championing the cause of a new political settlement for Bangladesh. Now that the July events have happened and there is a feeling that now is the time that we can launch a new political settlement. Many people think that the events of July 2024 was a revolution. I do not consider this event as a revolution. I call it a great mass uprising. What is a revolution? When a revolution takes place, the old state machine or the existing state machine is smashed. Number two, there is a transfer of power from one class to another class. Neither of these two has happened in Bangladesh. We are now trying to bring about some reforms. And even for bringing about reforms, we are facing unsurmountable obstacles. Why? We must go back to history, and the nationalist movement, Bengali nationalist movement, that took place during Pakistan days was actually a fight between the Pakistani big bourgeoisie and the aspiring bourgeoisie of Bangladesh. Although because of the international environment, Awami League talked about a socialist program. But as representative of its class, it wanted to, or it successfully utilized for launching an economic era where the logic of socialism will not work, but a new logic will work. I differ with the economists, most of the economists, about characterization of the Bangladesh economy. Bangladesh economy, to my mind, is an economy dominated by primitive accumulation. And primitive accumulation, according to Marx, is original sin. What happened in Bangladesh? After 16th of December 1971, there was an emergence of a class, a group of people who were called 16th Division. They were looting, plundering everything, and grabbing everything. And from there on, what happened? When the nationalization of industries took place, there was huge loot and plunder from this nationalized sector. And out of that grew a class of moneyed people. And these moneyed people started giving pressure on the then Awami League government to revise the investment ceiling. Originally, the investment ceiling was only 35 lakhs of Dhaka. But after in 1973 or 74, what happened? The ceiling was revised and it was raised up to 3 crores. Later on, it was raised up to 10 crores. And this all indicates how mighty and powerful had been this primitive accumulation class. Even in later days, especially during Sheikh Hasina's regime, what happened? A new class was created. They are called oligarchs. And there was an unholy alliance between Awami League leaders, these oligarchs, and other dishonest bureaucrats, corrupt bureaucrats. Now is the time that we should build a new economy. And this new economy should create proper incentives for the emergence of a really productive class. Once you can ensure the emergence of a really productive class of entrepreneurs, then alone you can expect democratic norms to work. According to Barrington Moore, he said, "No bourgeois, no democracy." So we need a class of bourgeois who are really productive, who would like to face competition, who would like to accumulate, and who would like to innovate. I mean, this sort of bourgeoisie we need. We don't need the kind of bourgeoisie that we have seen during last 15 and a half years or 16 years. So it's a big challenge. Then you have to create environment as congenial to the emergence of this new type of bourgeoisie. According to Mushtaq Khan, this can be done by enthusing the middle level entrepreneurs, especially the small and medium entrepreneurs. I think this can be a good strategy. But before that, we have to make it sure that we have created a real foundation for the emergence of a new, productive, and innovative bourgeoisie. If you cannot do it, then you will not achieve anything. So the question of revolution, and revolution means we have to create a new society, new economy, etc. But the problem is, like the Bengal Delta, we have a very unstable soil, and our society's foundation or soil is also very unstable. You cannot erect a 5-story building or 10-story building on an unstable soil. At the same manner, you cannot have reforms and lot of reforms on the foundation of a very unstable socio-economic condition. So you have to change that socio-economic foundation. And changing that socio-economic foundation means you have to have a new distribution of power. And in order to have new distribution of power, you need time, because we are not going through a revolutionary path. We are taking a path of gradualism. And gradualism means it will take time. And that's why in the near future, I do not see a very bright future for Bangladesh. That's my unhappy or unfortunate conclusion. And we have to wait, and if we wait, then we can see the results. Or otherwise, what will happen? Just like earlier days, another uprising, a cycle of uprising. And I don't know where it will rest and where it will come to a stop. So I thank Professor Mushtaq Khan for his brilliant ideas and very innovative ideas, new ideas. But the answer lies that you have to smash the rule of primitive accumulators. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I think the last point is very important, that we have to be much more innovative. We have to be transformative in approach to implement the whole new idea of the Professor Mushtaq Khan has said. But I believe that the new next generation should take the points Professor Mahbub has already mentioned, that we should not trap in the cycle of the uprise further. We don't want to see the much more souls have been lost further due to the, the whole state captures and other things. So the last speaker, Dr. Imran Matin, Executive Director of the BRAC Institute of the Governance and Development. Imran bhai, floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, I don't want to stand between lunch and, all of you. So, and after, such a wide ranging and very rich points and prominent speakers, I really don't have much to add. So I thought I'm going to focus on things that perhaps, haven't been kind of discussed here until now. So I really want to focus a bit on, what Mushtaq bhai talked about his framework around political settlement, but take it more in the context of the social sector. So I think one of the biggest implication of Mushtaq bhai's approach to thinking about how to reorganize power and political settlement when applied in the social sector context, I think, is to really think about how do we design accountability mechanisms. I think, one of the deepest challenge that I think have become even worse over time in our social sector is the challenge of accountability and reliability. And if you really think about it very carefully, and Mushtaq bhai did not really elaborate on this, I've had conversations with him on this, is that how do you design accountability mechanisms in a context where you do not have or have very weak rule of law context? And I think in that type of a situation, whilst we do need to work around improving rule of law, but we need to design accountability mechanisms in the interim as well. So how do you really solve this problem? Because without that, you're not going to get, especially social sector service delivery, where accountability from below is going to be not very strong, right? Because of the power imbalances. And this is exactly where I think we have to really think about horizontal and competitive forms of accountability to complement and at times really support the vertical accountability work that needs to happen. The vertical accountability improvement is the usual way we think about accountability improvements. But I think we also need to think around horizontal accountability and how do we really create more competitive forms of horizontal accountability. And this is exactly where I think the importance and importance of the community-based mechanisms and a people-centric community-based mechanism become extremely important. So how do we create collective arrangements at the community level to be able to act as structures of horizontal accountability, especially in the context of social sector service delivery? And I think this is going to be really, really important for our future as well, especially in the context of deepening vulnerability that we really are under, and a social sector that does not really take its accountability challenges seriously at all. So I think in terms of the reform agenda we are talking about, I think Mushtaq Bhai's framework around political settlement also has very important implications for the social sector reform, and that's something we should be thinking about seriously as well. I'll stop there. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I would not go detail about that, as we'll just close the whole session. Thank you, every speakers. I'm really delighted that before the targeted time, they have already sacrificed to just conclude their speech with their very limited words. I will not go detail about what they have already mentioned, but what is really important that, whenever anyone borns, doesn't matter human being or other living beings, it is their natural right to have the oxygen and to access the clean and fresh water, also not to have been succumbed with the plastic pollutions, and also to enjoy the the ambient environment. So this is not actually the constitutional matter or any universal human rights declarations matter. It is related to the natural rights. So what about the political settlement or the economic reforms? What the natural resources we have, and that is the common resources for the intergenerational consumptions. That should be kept in mind. In the names of sometimes so-called development, we are actually distracting the sustainable resources. Without that, not a single economic intervention could sustain. So that should be kept in mind in the fundamental reforms in the coming days. What we observed, we have a lots of, the policy, lots of economic activity, but we really forget about the constrained and natural resources we have. Bangladesh as a delta, the deltaic region compared to the other deltaic region, it is the delta which has been always volatile, which has been always the evolving. So whatever the economic policies or the political settlement, we should not think about for the longer term approach and the longer term, the fixed intervention, rather than it should be dynamic in nature. It should be evolving in nature. It should be always adaptive. And that's really very important whenever any things come into the mind for any political settlement or the economic reforms. So with that point, I would conclude that this is the Bengal Delta Conference as a partner and also as a journey of this new journey. Bangladesh should have a
actually the broader visions, and at the coming days, it should accommodate others rather than to work as a single approach as a nation. Rather than we should be more inclusive, more the productive nation for others, not only for ourselves but also for others. With that words, I am concluding the sessions. And again, thank you very much, the audience. Thank you very much.